All right, welcome everyone. It is Tuesday, May 19th, 2020, and we are here at City Hall and across Athens-Clarke County for our monthly agenda setting session with the Mayor and Commission, which is going to be preceded by a special called session where we have 3 items to consider. I hope everybody out there in the community is doing well. We have to begin, as we always do, with a special called session with a roll call. So, Clerk Spratlin, if you could call roll, please.
Davenport.
Here.
Parker.
Here.
Blink.
Here.
Wright.
Present.
Denson.
Here.
Naismith.
Present.
Edwards.
Yep. Here.
Harrod.
Present.
Thornton.
Here.
Hamby.
Here.
We have a quorum.
All right, thank you, Madam Clerk. This is a little atypical, so I'm going to explain what's going to happen next. I'm going to ask for a motion to amend the agenda to include an executive session in this special called session to consider matters of real estate and pending litigation. And should that motion carry, we're going to go ahead and enter executive session actually at the front end of this meeting, and public information is going to put up for public viewing a notice on the feed that we are in executive session and will be exiting shortly. So with that explanation given, would anybody care to make a motion to amend the agenda to include an executive session for the purposes of real estate discussion and pending litigation?
So moved.
Second.
All right, I've got a motion from Commissioner Edwards to amend the agenda, a second from Commissioner Parker. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, I'd ask for a call to enter executive session for the purpose of real estate and litigation.
So moved.
Got a motion from Commissioner Edwards. I've got a second from Commissioner Thornton. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and give staff just a couple of moments to put the screen up. And Todd, if you just let me know when we are ready to continue. All right, everyone. We are rejoining our special called session following our executive session, and we are ready to consider items of new business. The first of these items is public hearing and deliberation regarding a special use request in the AR district on 0.557 acres of a 34-acre tract at 855 Nowhere Road. I believe we've got a public input opportunity set up in the chamber below, and so I'm going to give public information staff a second to make that go live so we can take our public input.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the commission. My name is Chuck Palmer. I was here a month ago. Y'all asked a number of questions during that meeting and then after the meeting. And, I provided a letter last week that attempted to explain all of that and answer all the questions. I've also got, and a lot of them were engineering in nature. And Robert Wally, who is the head of engineering for this region for Verizon, I believe, is participating by WebEx. And so rather than having you hear from me, I think you'd probably prefer to hear from him and answer any ask questions of either of us. So I'll turn it over to Mr. Wally right now. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Mr. Palmer. Mr. Wally, go right ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chuck. Thanks, everybody, for having us today and giving us a chance to speak to you. My name is Robert Wally. I live in Birmingham, Alabama right now. I do have a son that applied to Georgia for what that's worth. He got in, but out-of-state tuition is a little out of reach. But if he had his choice, that's where he'd be. So I am the RF engineering manager for the state of Georgia. Have been in this role since March 15th. And I just wanted to give you quickly an overview of how we select a place to put a cell site, just so you have a kind of a background on what we do, and then take your any questions that you have. So the main thing that happens, and in the case of this site, we call it Nowhere, we have programs that can tell us when we expect our existing network to exhaust, when we expect it to go to a point where our customers are no longer getting what they're paying for. And so this happened for the Nowhere site. We then give that problem that we now know of to an RF design engineer who analyzes the problem using the tools that we have to decide what the customer usage patterns are, where they are, and what is the absolute best solution for us with regard to a new tower to serve all those customers and maximize the coverage and capacity for those customers without having to put cell sites on every street corner. And in this case, we landed with this site in this location that we're calling the Nowhere site. For us, we use design tools to do this. It takes into account the terrain. It takes into account tree clutter, building clutter, things like that, and tower heights, antenna types, and things like that, and gives us the best possible solution that we could put out there for the customer. So that's how we got to where we are today in the proposed location that we wanted. From there, we take that, we give that to a real estate broker who finds people that are interested in leasing us their property for the purpose of building a tower and serving their customers. So we lease this piece of property, and then of course it goes through all of the county and city processes to get approvals. So that's a little background on how it happens for us. In case you didn't know that, you may have already known that, but just a little background. Now, any questions about the information that Chuck provided, or anything else that you want to talk about that I can try to answer for you today?
Thanks, Mr. Whaley. If you just hang on the line, we may have questions in a couple of minutes.
Sure.
All right. I believe that is it for public comment. I don't believe anybody else has come this evening, so we'll go ahead and enter commission discussion. And of course, we have Mr. Whaley and Mr. Palmer who are here that could answer any questions that you may have, as well as, of course, Athens-Clarke County staff. So, Mr. Denson.
We asked them to mute the public comment because we're getting feedback.
I'm going to do exactly that. I appreciate it.
Mr. Mayor.
Go right ahead. I appreciate it, Attorney Drake.
I just want to make sure that Mr. Palmer, they've still got time, doesn't have any other comments. I didn't know if he was done.
This is Chuck Palmer. I wasn't sure how much time we had. I think we went for roughly 3 minutes. If there's nothing for rebuttal, we'll just be happy to answer any questions that you may have. So we'll just go from here and just respond to questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Palmer. All right, Commissioner Denson, the senior district, so I'm going to ask you to kick off conversation.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. And I appreciate Mr. Palmer and the other staff for being here to answer questions and give some of that background. I know there's been some interest from the commission for us to potentially explore locations on county-owned property nearby that would be compatible for construction of this telecommunications tower. So I'd like us to direct staff and hopefully work with Verizon. Hopefully Mr. Palmer can tell us if that would be okay or not. For us to work together to find some potential locations on that county-owned property that might be compatible and be a better fit for this area. And with that direction, the staff, I'll also make a motion for us to go ahead and table this item.
All right, so I've got a motion from Commissioner Denson to direct staff to work with Verizon to identify any Athens-Clarke County and property in the vicinity that may be viable for this function. And
I second it.
table this. All right, so I've got a motion from Commissioner Denson. I've got a second from Commissioner Thornton. I'm looking at the little hand icons. Any other commissioner have input they'd like to provide on this matter? All right.
Mr. Mayor, can we see if the Verizon attorney has any comment to offer?
Absolutely. Yeah, Mr. Palmer, any interest in this course of action?
We're happy to work with the county, with Athens-Clarke County on this. We'd like to come up with a solution that makes sense for everyone. And so yeah, we'll work with Attorney Drake and his team on approaching the district court judge and saying we'd like to have another extension in order to accommodate that. And then we'll get together and see what we can figure out and hopefully come up with a win-win. So thank you.
Great, I appreciate it, Mr. Palmer.
Mayor, I wanted to, I sat with attorneys Drake and Hawkins on Friday for almost 2 hours, going over the report that Verizon sent. I believe they answered every question that was presented by members in the community. And that took a lot of time and a lot of thought. So I appreciate the intent of us continuing to try to work this out, because I know that they didn't have to. And I hope that everybody will be on board a little longer for us to get this worked out. But that was a very intense report. And I don't believe they had to do that. So the continuation of this cooperation, I think, is really good. So saying all of that, I do want to thank Verizon for working with us.
Thanks for that, Commissioner Thornton. Any other input on this item? Commissioner Harry? I think you're muted, Commissioner.
There we go. I had unmuted it, but I guess I got muted again. My only question was, so on the motion, table it for how long?
Commissioner Denson.
I guess with that, to Attorney Drake, I mean, do we feel that giving a month would give us enough time to get everything done that we need?
Well, I think I would say 45 days. Is Mr. Palmer still there? Can you hear Chuck? He's muted, Mayor.
I can unmute him.
Yes, I'm not going anywhere until you tell me to leave. So yeah, 45 days would be fine.
Okay, I'll amend my motion then to that we hold the item till I guess the July voting session would get us about that time frame.
That's through the second Tuesday in July, or through the first Tuesday in July, excuse me.
I think that'd be appropriate.
Okay.
My second is still in place with the amendment.
Great. Thanks, Commissioner Thornton. All right. Any further discussion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. So staff is going to go ahead and interact with Verizon to see if there are any suitable locations. And the zoning matter is tabled through the first Tuesday in July. All right. Moving on to appointments to the Joint Development Authority of Athens-Clarke County, Georgia, and the City of Winterville. I was able to conduct interviews with Commissioner Link, Commissioner Denson, and Commissioner Neesmith about a week and a half ago. And I just sent to you before this meeting the three names up for approval this evening. And I'd entertain a motion for acceptance of those three appointees to the Joint Development Authority.
So moved.
I'll second.
All right, I've got a motion from Commissioner Denson, second from Commissioner Link.
That was Neesmith. Sorry,
all in
Mayor.
favor?
It was me.
Oh, that's all right. All right, all in favor?
Mayor.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
All right, any opposed? All right, so I want to very much thank Erica Casio, Simone Cifuentes, and Stephanie Lynn for stepping up to the plate and being willing to serve on this Joint Development Authority. This has been an understandable item of community interest. Manager Williams, if you could just briefly describe how our Economic Development Office will be working to assist the Joint Development Authority in execution of this small business loan package that we've had under discussion.
Yes. So Ilka McConnell is our Economic Development Director, and she will be the staff person to the Joint Development Authority. And she has been working with other folks in the business community, our chamber, and other partners about what the loan program could look like. Obviously, we'd like to have the Joint Development Authority, newly formed, weigh in on the program and help to shape that. And so shortly after this is consummated, staff will have some drafts ready to go ahead and share with them and hit the ground running with trying to pull together a good program. We do have a similar effort, if you will, with HCD, with our revolving loan program, but it is a different animal, and we would expect that this is going to be a much larger scale and require a good bit of underwriting expertise, and so we may be partnering as well. But we'll be consulting the folks you just approved to get their feedback.
Wonderful. And just so everybody knows, Winterville has already appointed their kind of resident members, and so I'll be working in the morning to try and pull together a meeting kind of within the next week so we can kick this off. So, Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if the manager could give us some kind of ballpark ETA as to when this program might be announced to the public and folks can start applying for that assistance.
Well, I'd like to, Commissioner Link, I'd love to consult these new folks here and they may have some different ideas about how this could be rolled out. I think also, and I'm glad you asked, the other piece to this would be your approval of some portion of the resiliency package or some other funding to capitalize the fund. And I know that y'all have talked about that a great deal and really are just waiting to take that step. And that step is currently contemplated about a month from now, June the 16th, I believe, when you would be approving the budget so that you can go through all the budget discussions and deliberations, understanding the parts and pieces of both one-time funds and ongoing revenues and the relief that you would like to see for the community.
I just want to urge that we get this program up and running as quickly as possible. Our local businesses are in bad shape. Those federal loans were pretty much a joke. Anybody who did get them has come to a rude awakening that they're not very helpful in helping to cover operating expenses. And they're loans that do have to be paid back if they're not utilized right away, yet they're very limited in what they can be used for. It seems like that federal program was designed mostly to benefit large corporations who were using it to pay off their executives with bonuses, because it's mostly able to be used for payroll. So it's urgent. It's really, really urgent that we come up with some program that can help fill that gap, that operating expense gap. We're going to lose many, many treasured businesses that are really part of our identity. They're part of our local culture, and it's urgent that we move as quickly as possible to help these folks.
Commissioner Dempsey.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, and I agree. I guess I do ask if I guess to Blaine, is there any way that we possibly could at least fast track that step? And if we did fast track that step, to vote on it before voting on the entire budget, would that help us quicken the ability to release these funds?
I don't think so, Commissioner Denson. This has got to be something that passes muster as being able to lend out money and receive it back. And again, we want to consult the newly formed authority to make sure that the criteria that are being considered, that they've had the opportunity to understand and weigh in on it. I'd like to hope that within this next 30 days that a lot of good work could be done, so that when it comes time, because they could come up with some really great criteria, and the figures that some folks are thinking may be more or less than what's actually needed. So I think all of it coming together in the next 30 days, you having that information will help make that decision.
Okay. That helps answer that then. And I guess just my last comment will be, I just highly encourage and push that we have these loans be 0% interest. I understand we can't be doing grants because of the gratuities clause and such like that. But for a lot of the reasons that Commissioner Link laid out there, I think we need to maximize the benefit to these businesses that are struggling and going to be struggling for a while. And I would urge us to explore having this interest be the interest be 0% on this.
Commissioner Thornton.
And this would be just an opportunity to say, and while we're setting up the criteria, I hope that we are conscious of to remove as many barriers for people receiving these loans. If we're going to operate like the federal government or the state and not have some flexibility in there, you're still going to have a bunch of people who are going to be totally out of the loop. And I am, and I'll just say it, I'm very concerned about the small African-American businesses, the barbershops and the beauty shops. Those are businesses that are prevalent in the Black community and often are left out because of different things. So hopefully that we will, I know we can't designate and have, I know that, but I do hope that we have a policy that will look at, look beyond the usual folks. So I hope that is, I'm sorry, my dog. I just hope that we would take that in consideration. Sometimes you're going to step out of your loop a little bit to know who's out there. And we got some folks that can help.
Thanks, Commissioner. All right. I think we're ready to move on to the third item of business on our special called session, which is a resolution authorizing settlement of litigation. Attorney Drake, I'm going to call on you to kick this off just to kind of provide a broad overview of this item.
I'm happy to, Mr. Mayor. In 1 second. Mr. Mayor, this resolution authorizes the settlement of that litigation that's currently pending in the District Court, the Middle District of Georgia, Adam Bishop versus Athens-Clarke County Unified Government. This matter involved 2 police officers of the unified government who were alleged to have violated the constitutional rights of free speech and freedom of religion at the Athens Pride Festival that was on about September 29, 2019. Our attorney, outside firm, Cook and Tolly, has been able to successfully negotiate a resolution in this matter to settle it with actually 3 purported plaintiffs for $25,000. And so we think, and also they require training in the future just to make sure our officers understand their requirements relative to enforcement in traditional public forums relative to future festivals and other events like the Athens Pride Festival. We think it's a good resolution, and I recommend the approval of this resolution.
Thank you, Attorney Drake. I appreciate you and your office working on this matter and coming to a resolution. Any commission input or call for motion? Commissioner Neesmith?
Yeah, I just have a question. It's perhaps a little tangential. Does this prevent us from controlling the use of amplification devices in situations like this?
No, sir. I think, that's a separate matter. As long as we're at the parameters of what we're legally allowed to do, the commission can consider future regulation related to that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I was going to ask the same question that Commissioner Neesmith asked. I really think we do need to explore some regulation of amplified
leaf blowers.
Yeah, I know folks, leaf blowers. I know folks that do organized protests. They have a permit, and there's certainly a way to permit that amplification. But I've also seen those permitted protests be interrupted by counter protesters with amplified devices, and real tensions arise. So I do believe we need to, not to mention just the noise on the loud music on the sidewalk. And leaf blowers. I really feel I would ask the mayor that we assign this to some committee to address outdoor noise and amplification, especially downtown where things are so tightly packed.
Commissioner. Any other input? All right, I'd certainly entertain a motion.
I'll go ahead and move.
Second.
I've got a motion for acceptance of this resolution authorizing settlement of litigation from Commissioner Link. I have a second from Commissioner Edwards. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Matter is resolved. All right, I'm going to go ahead and ask for adjournment of special called session so we can enter our regular.
Second.
So moved.
Second.
All right, so we've got a motion from Commissioner Wright, a second from Commissioner Neesmith to adjourn special called session and enter our regular agenda setting session. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. We're going to go ahead and move on to our agenda setting session. We have a number of items on the consent agenda. As kind of has been practiced during the crisis period, any public input is entered into the record that's been received online through our online system. I'm going to go ahead and ask commissioners, would anyone like to remove an item from the consent agenda? Commissioner Wright?
Thank you, Kelly. Yes, I have some questions about the Oconee Streetbridge.
All right, we're going to go ahead and remove number 2 from consent. Any other item? Commissioner Harrod?
Number 4 for a question.
All right. Any other one? All right. We'll go ahead and we'll take up those 2 items and then old and new business. Beginning with number 2, Allison, you said you had a couple questions.
Yes, I had a constituent bring up this port, and I am very excited about this project, but the details that we had, even in the work session, were all about the underpass. I don't think this is going to come about tonight, but between now and the voting meeting, I'd like to get details of the bridge top part to make sure that the pedestrian and bicycle accommodations are properly in there. So if we could just get some follow up on that and make sure that the road and the bridge is being wide enough for what we expect with our current, not complete streets or whatever is what we need. Make sure we're not losing any width or passageway.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I'd reiterate Commissioner Wright's concerns, and also I'd like to have some concept of landscaping. You know, I know a lot when GDOT does these projects, there's a lot of vegetation that's removed, and you end up with this wide open space. And I'd just like some information on, are they going to plant or replant street trees, or you know, this is it has potential for high pedestrian activity, and it's also kind of south facing, I believe, or southeast facing. I just really think we need to pay attention to these landscape concerns up front and make sure there's street trees to provide shade for those pedestrians and cyclists.
Manager Williams, can you give any perspective on kind of when a landscaping plan may come through for approval?
Well, if I might, no, sir, I don't have that, but I will find that out and respond to everyone. I do want to address Commissioner Wright's question, and with the wonder that is WebEx these days, may I share my screen with you?
Please do.
Okay. And we can repeat this as well. And I will send you all this attachment so that you can share with any particular constituents. And I'm sorry, but things are taking a little bit longer here than normal. So this is an aerial look at the bridge replacement and the plans from GDOT. And you know, this is Oconee Street here going over the river. This would be the downtown side, and this would be heading out towards Lexington Road. And to Commissioner Wright's comment, you're right. The subject of tonight's agenda item has to do with this underpass connection that goes under the bridge and represents a lot of coordination and cooperation with GDOT on the construction of this, so that there's enough space for us to get this under there. And so a lot of good work being done there. To your question specifically, if you'll look closely here, and I know it's a bit of an eye chart, but if you can look, there is a plan for a shared use path on the southern edge of the bridge, and there's a tie-in to the sidewalk going up Carr's Hill. And on the other side is a sidewalk. So they have a shared use path on one side and sidewalk on the other to facilitate folks getting across there. So I just wanted to share that with you. That is currently in the plans for some at-grade pedestrian crossing of the river there.
And it appears that shared use path ties into the trailhead already present there.
Yes, sir.
Across, the river from Nucci Space.
Yes, sir.
Great. Any other questions of Manager Williams, or anything you'd like to have him review with staff? Commissioner Herod?
Yes, so one of the things I would like to see if it's possible to do, several years ago when I talked with the GDOT representative about re-engineering the loop at Lexington and Barnett Shoals, we had talked about the possibility of perhaps hanging some public art on the bridge, so that traffic coming in and out of Athens would have something a bit more interesting to look at than simply the side of a concrete bridge. They said that that is possible. Obviously, there are some restrictions on exactly how it can be done, but given that people will be approaching that bridge from the Greenway and then also passing by on the multi-use path, I would like to see if we could possibly explore the possibilities of having some kind of public art on the side of that bridge, so it looks a little bit more interesting than simply a concrete bridge that you are approaching or passing along the side of.
And given that this is a SPLOST project, I would imagine this would normally be something that could accept the kind of 1% of project cost designated for public art. Commissioner Wright?
Manager Williams, thank you for that. The quality of that image that you just showed us, if you'll send that to us separate. I see that it's the same one we had in the work session, but you're not able to get that appreciation of the detail. So if you'll send that out as a separate And then I guess I'll be fine for this to go back on consent if the follow-up on the topics, we could just reiterate, make sure that's happening, or do you feel like that should stay off consent? What's the group think?
Well, and if I might offer this too, I did get some feedback from staff that I don't think there is any landscaping currently planned. That's due to the overhead power lines on the south side and not much room on the north side. The underpass, and just to be clear, just Commissioner Harrod, you know, the underpass going under the new bridge built by GDOT is SPLOST. Well, TSPLOST, I should say. And there's a small bridge across Trail Creek on the underside. The bridge itself is being paid for by state funds. Now, but the intent is understood. We can certainly approach them and ask them if they would be open to that.
Yeah, that's all I'm asking is, as I say, with the discussion about the reconstruction of the bridge at the Loop, that's GDOT money as well. But they said that, you know, they're not going to pay for it, but they would not be unamenable to us doing something as long as it met their health and safety standards and we paid for it.
That's right. You're correct, sir.
Commissioner Neve?
I see that there's about $68,000 on the agenda report for public art. Is that appropriate for this project? Is that what that's for?
I would imagine it's the case.
Let me get there real quick. Sorry. We've got $1 million for the construction, and typically it was 1%.
I'm looking at the first page, budget information and capital, and the second line is $67,796 for designated public art.
That's for all tiers.
Yeah, so that's for the entirety of that project category.
I believe the Arts and Cultural Commission may have, that's what's remaining that hasn't yet been expended, and I believe that is with for the MLK section. So what we capture there is you know, things that are previously designated. So it wouldn't be to this particular project, but I would tell you, Commissioner Neesmith, based on the construction, I think the ordinance was 1% of construction costs. So,
yes.
So roughly $10,000 there for some type of public art, and we would work closely with the Arts and Cultural Affairs Commission on that. But we've captured your comments, and we'll definitely share that with them.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go ahead and leave this off consent and get some of those answers for next time. All right. I think Commissioner Harrod asked for discussion of item number 4, the Lexington Road private pump station, which is over near the East Side Walmart. Go ahead, Andy.
I did. Thank you. I just have one question. So in going through the materials here, I'm looking at the letter from Beal and Company, which is page 87 of our PDF. And they indicate that in this project that they are proposing to install 1 water meter per building to serve all dwelling units in the building. I was under the impression that we were going to try to discourage having single meters for large buildings with multiple users in them because it makes it much more difficult to basically control water use in times of drought if nobody feels that they're particularly responsible for the water bill. It's just something, you know, they just use it without having to think about how much they're using. And so I just wanted to ask the question of whether it's possible to have public utilities take a look at that and see if they can be individually metered or what, really more as a way of, as we're getting more conscious about water use moving into the future and, you know, redesigning how we build our buildings and that kind of stuff is something to think about.
Andrew Williams, is that something that public utilities can respond to?
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner Harrod.
Any other questions about this item? All right. Moving on to old business. Number 7 is the Athens-Clarke County Department of Corrections and Georgia Department of Transportation Corridor Beautification Agreement. And, we've got a second work session scheduled for this month. That'll be a week from tonight. And this will cover broadly the corrections unit and the range of educational and career opportunities that could be infused there. So we've had some discussion here, but if there's no other interest, we'll really kind of follow up in a broader way next Tuesday, a week from tonight. All right, and we have number 8. This is the second final reading, an ordinance under the home rule powers granted to Athens-Clarke County to amend the charter of the unified government with respect to what's broadly termed the police power of Athens-Clarke County, Georgia. And by police power, of course, we don't mean the actual police force that people think of as the Athens-Clarke County Police Department or the Sheriff's Department. It really is the sort of functional opportunity to provide broader aid than we have currently embedded in our charter. And so, we would, at our voting meeting coming up, approve that charter amendment so that we can continue to distribute some aid to the community. So any questions about that item? All right, moving on to number 9, the Government Operations Committee report. This is development of a consistent leasing policy for Athens-Clarke County properties. Commissioner Harrod, did you want to address this as committee chair?
Sure, thank you. So this came about because we had a discussion several months ago about various different entities renting our property, and there was some concern that perhaps that wasn't being done equitably. As we looked into it, as I recall, and the manager can perhaps correct me if I'm wrong here, but as we looked into it, what we found out is that actually everybody was being charged the same amount of rent from the county, but the difference was accounted for by supplemental things. For example, some entities were having the county cut their grass and some entities were doing that on their own. And so that was largely influencing why people were paying what they were paying. But anyway, that was the background. And so in the context of that, we were directed to take a broader look at the way in which we rent out property. And it's a long agenda report, so I won't go through everything, but to cut a long story short, we tried to come up with a formula that looked at how much rent should be charged in terms of a combination of market rate and then with some discounts for things like is it to be rented for a profit-making activity versus a non-profit-making activity? What is the contribution of the user of the property to helping us fulfill our mayor and commission goals with regards to serving the community? Those kinds of questions that are all listed. So our staff did a lot of work on this as a kind of a complicated formula. We are recommending, though, that so that there are no surprises, that we keep everything with a $1 rent for the next year or so, and that also to make it easier for the finance department to operationalize this, that the changes that the contracts that people sign with us, to the extent that we can, we will end up running them on a July 1, June 30th cycle. So that will correspond with our budget. There are 2 or 3, I think, I can't remember off the top of my head who they are, but there are 2 or 3 that have slightly longer leases. And so obviously that is not possible right at the present moment. But the intent was that once those leases are cycled out, that we would, or whoever's on the commission at that time would approve having everyone go to a July 1, June 30th option. So that's basically it.
Thanks, Andy. I appreciate it. Let's see. I'm looking at the hand icons. Mariah, you had your hand up?
I think Commissioner Harrod answered my main question, but just in case, so we'd continue to have the leases set for $1 for a year or so at least a year, and then we'd reevaluate after that year period. Okay, he looks like he's nodding, so I'm gonna go with yeah. Cool. And then
Sorry, it says hold for FY20 and FY21 lease
Okay.
renewal for $1 a year.
Great, thank you. And then my second question, so after FY21, then the process would open for various entities to apply for discounts based on the services they provide the community, et cetera. Okay, great, thank you.
And just to clarify, and either Andy or maybe Manager Williams can answer this, would that proceed essentially right away so that we would sort of leave fiscal year 20 and enter year fiscal year 21, excuse me, with that conversation actively happening, again, to have several months of preview opportunity?
That's my understanding. And the other thing I just wanted to add is that for some of the entities that have a longer term contract, who may, because of the new formula, actually end up paying less than they presently are, we had talked about allowing the opportunity to renegotiate that contract. In other words, not to penalize them for having been locked into a longer contract when they could perhaps have a shorter one at a lower rate. Does my memory serve me correctly, Josh?
You are correct. And Commissioner Parker, just to answer one of your questions, we plan on spending this next year talking with each of the lessees about the changes. So we'll be working on this all year.
Okay. And then I actually just had one more question. Is my understanding correct that Central Services would be evaluating these applications for the discounts?
So we'll be working with the lessees as they apply, but all of them will come to y'all for approval.
Up to us. Okay.
And so, one of the changes is a community benefits agreement. And so that's something that y'all will weigh as you determine the leases. And so that community benefits agreement, if it meets your criteria, will allow for a significant discount as well. But we've kind of framed that around your mayor and commission strategic commitments.
Okay.
And the lease will be for 1 year, but y'all will be able to determine automatic updates, so automatic renewals. And so you could say a leasee can have 4 additional automatic renewals, but y'all get to determine that number when you sign the lease.
Okay, thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Josh. Other questions about this item, Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that there was some discussion of the value of each of these properties leases depending on their location and what similar nearby properties would rent for. So that was kind of a determining factor in coming up with the recommended amounts for the rents too. There's certainly a different value for, say, a prime downtown property than something further away from downtown or off a commercial path. So that was a factor as well.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Neesmith.
I just want to say that Director Andrew Saunders and his staff and Josh did a fantastic job in their analysis and in their innovation and thinking outside the box to come up with this. It is a long document, but we went through a lot of different iterations to get here.
Jerry,
You can't hear me?
you're going in and out.
So are you.
It might be your internet connection, Melissa, because I don't think we could see you either.
Yeah, I can hear Jerry all right.
Yeah, Melissa, I'm sorry. Sorry, Melissa, you were chopping up too. Anyway, I just want to compliment the staff and thank them for making this very difficult job still difficult for them, but a lot easier for us. And I thank them much.
Great. Commissioner Denson.
Thank you, Mayor. And I'll second everything that Commissioner Neesmith said. I was very impressed by staff and then the whole committee for getting through what was very complicated. We went through multiple iterations. I think we came up with something really, really great, and it day one did not look like this. And yeah, I think that the community benefits agreement is integral and is an important piece that's really going to help us utilize our government-owned buildings much better and make sure that they are actually benefiting the community as they should be, because they are publicly owned properties, publicly owned buildings owned by the people. And yeah, it's important to point out that yeah, those things will be coming before the commission to decide on, so that we can be weighing those things. And one last, I think, important piece that I don't think was mentioned is there's also a rental revenue share part put into this too, so that if there are organizations who are using our buildings and they are renting it out and making money off of it, we kind of allowed that to a degree, basically as long as they weren't making more than $3,600 a year, so that they could be renting out at a very affordable rate to community members. But if it turned into that it was a revenue generating business, that rentals, that there would be a rental share component put in there too. Again, I think that's important to make sure and ensure that these buildings and properties are being used for the benefit of our entire community.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Wright?
Thank you. That just reminded me of a question. I remember one of the leases we renewed not so long ago had a person who got to live in one of our museum houses free of rent. Did you guys cover which one of our properties are also being a dwelling for someone? Was that covered?
I don't remember us discussing that. No.
Okay.
So,
Well,
Commissioner, I guess
hopefully
that's that Taylor Grady house that
Yeah.
has a caretaker.
With a pet too. But I think that hopefully I'll be around to discuss in a couple of years how we can refine some of those things. Okay, thanks. That's
Any other input on this item?
Is there a willingness or a desire to put it on consent, or do we still need to discuss it some?
I'm good with consent.
Consent's all right with everybody? All right.
I have a quick
Melissa,
Yeah, go ahead, Melissa.
the question.
We had discussed some of these properties generating revenue, and there was a certain cap. Did that make it in? I'm trying to recall if that made it in.
Over that part, Melissa. I think you were-
Yeah, I think you missed that, Melissa. Andy just discussed that.
Yeah, the audio has been really bad. I
Yeah.
totally missed.
They went over that they could have up to $3,600 in a year, and then after that, it was a profit sharing,
Yeah.
revenue
That's-
sharing.
Okay. All right. Everybody fine with this on consent?
Yes.
Mhm.
All right, great. We're going to move on to item number 10. This is the water line upgrades for FY21, approval of preliminary construction plans. Any discussion of this item? Shall it be okay if we move this to consent?
Yeah, let's move to consent.
All right, we are winning tonight. Number 9, number 10 on consent, Gene. All right,
Well, and Mayor, if I just might, since it's going to consent, just make the comment that, the citizens, the rates that they do pay, and we'll be talking more about rates, of course, in a minute, but this is yet another example of reinvesting in our infrastructure in replacement and renewal. And that is something that this mayor and commission has supported, past mayor and commissions have supported, and I think that we're well ahead of other communities in the way that we go about that good work.
great. And speaking of good work, we're moving on to item number 11. This is a GIS-based permitting and development management system. Manager Williams, could you just outline what this is going to be able to provide for us in terms of functionality?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So the plans review process is not something that a lot of folks outside the development community may be familiar with. But if there was a new development to occur, the state has any number of codes that they require for site and building development. And then there are a number of local regulations that the mayor and commission have created over the years, such as a tree ordinance and things of that nature. And so those plans have to be reviewed, and it's more than just one department. It's not just building inspection, it's planning, it's public utilities, it's the fire department. We even transit and solid waste review it for bus stops, for where garbage receptacles are located. And then the health department's outside of the government, and they also review this, and transportation and public works. So there's a number of departments that have to review these plans. As you can imagine, they're highly technical, and with all those things to make sure that things are being followed. We do have a plans review software that we use now. We've been using it for about 12 years. It's not being supported by the vendor anymore. And really what this is going to allow us to do is really take advantage of electronic plans review. That's going to be helpful in a number of ways. Certainly now that will cut down on interactions when we transfer these plans. It'll cut down on paper. It will cut down on costs for the customers to have to do that, and hopefully help us respond quicker. And so this is something that I want to thank Joseph D'Angelo and several of the departments for going through this process of going through an RFP and selecting this. So we're hopeful it'll improve the functionality and the customer experience as well.
Thanks, Manager Williams. I know this has been an area of interest for a long time. I've got Commissioner Link and then Commissioner Neesmith.
Yeah, this sounds really good, and it could very much streamline the process for folks who want to invest and build in our community, which I know can be pretty hard to manage, especially for folks who are new to development. So hopefully this will enable some upstart entrepreneurs, to take that step. I have a question. Could this software, this process, be applied to the historic preservation review process? Could that help streamline that process and make it more automated? Because right now there's a lot of forms and papers and CDs that you got to load your information onto and stuff like that.
That I'm not sure, Commissioner Link, but I can ask the review group that went through all the proposals and see if that is something that it's inherently able to do, or if there's a separate module. But oftentimes these are created to deal with a lot of the ancillary processes that run close to this. So there's a good possibility of that. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Yeah. If you could get some information on that, because I think it would, really help folks be more open to, historic districts if they knew that the process for applying for a certificate of appropriateness was a lot more streamlined and could be done from your laptop rather than having to move a bunch of papers and hardware, software.
And I will say that these new software packages are great with review workflow. Notifications of where people know that it's ready for their to look at, or that they're done with what they're doing. So a lot of this can be automated, as well as generating emails back to the clients or customers as well.
Thank you.
Commissioner Neesmith. You've still got you muted, Jerry.
Jerry, drop off.
There we go.
There you go.
I'm all for this. I see that Advocate has lots of solutions, and it's mainly around records management and workflow. So I suspect, Melissa, with some more money, something like what you described could be done. I do have a question about their fees. I see that they're charging us $153,000 a year. I assume that's for the license, and this is cloud-based. And then there's another annual service of $59,000 a year, which is optional. I find that very unusual for there to be an annual fee and then a service agreement on top of that. Usually, the annual fee concludes service, but that's not the way their pricing is structured, I guess, huh?
That's correct, and that was a similar question that I had. The maintenance is the top level maintenance that they offer. And that's 24/7, 365 coverage, and is intended to take place of a staffer. Now, with our current product, InterGov, we really dedicated most of the time of a full-time person in planning to help, customize that, work with the company. And here we're basically taking that cost and deferring it to the company instead of trying to do that in-house.
But does that $153,000 include any customization? I can't imagine that.
It does. It was in line with many of the other proposals, and we can break that down. What is included in those costs for you?
Yeah, I'd like to see that. I'd like to see are they doing customization in order to implement the solution that we need? That's one question.
Yes, sir.
And if they're doing customization, if we don't have an annual service agreement, are they going to support the customized product?
Yes, I do believe it involves customization, and yes, they will support the customized product.
If we pay the service agreement?
Yes, sir.
Okay, any clarification on that, I would very much appreciate, sir.
We will do that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jared. Thanks, Manager Williams. Any other questions about this? All right, I'm going to move on to the rate structure amendments, item number 12. We, of course, talked about this in the context of a work session. I know there were a couple of questions about whether to use the annual average or the winter average. Does everybody kind of move to a comfort level with what was presented, or still some open questions? Commissioner Harrod and then Commissioner Link.
Thank you. So as I said at the work session, I appreciate staff's work on this. There's a lot has gone into it. I think all of the things that they're suggesting make a lot of sense. The one that I'm still not sold on, though, is at the moment shifting from the winter average to the average, I guess, because I do think that leads to a situation in which the people who are very good at conserving water during the year will end up subsidizing those who are using a lot of water in the summer to water their lawns and do other kinds of things. And so I would much rather us move forward without including that part in what's being proposed at the moment. And if we did not include that part, just to make it revenue neutral, it might be possible to widen the bands more between what they're presently being suggested to be widened to. So I don't know where my colleagues are on this issue, but as I say, everything else to me is great. But I do have a bit of a concern that moving away from the winter average to the average ends up having small water users subsidizing large water users in the summer.
Commissioner Link and then Commissioner Neesmith.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have those concerns too. I see this presented as an opportunity for average households to actually save money on their bills, on their water bills. So I think that's a good thing. I'm wondering if we could get some clarity from staff. I'm sure they've done the calculations on how these pan out with the winter averages versus the annual averages. So yeah, I'd like to see, some clear numbers on that. But I do see, I like this. I like those water bands, and the potential for making, adding some stability to folks' water bills. You can have a house guest for a month or two, or a new baby in the house and using a lot of water temporarily, and you get thrust into another tier and your bill goes through the roof. So those water bands can help accommodate some of those surprises, and so they're not surprises.
Well, what we can do, Commissioners Link and Harrod, we can give you some detailed responses to these questions, any others that the commissioners have, particularly around the annual average and winter average. I think, and I appreciate these questions. There's a lot of details, a very complicated subject, and y'all have obviously dug in and understood it, and we can zero in on some of this and give you a little bit more here in the next couple of days.
Thanks, Manager Williams. I think Commissioner Neesmith and then Commissioner Denson.
Yeah, just amplifying a little bit about what Commissioner Harrod suggested there. I think going to the winter average, back to keeping the winter average is for the reasons he mentioned, is a good idea. But maybe to compensate, maybe have that second tier just a little bit wider, so that people are benefiting from conserving water, but not benefiting from using too much water to get their average up. I think that's the issue here. So I would like to see our water folks look at the impact of staying with the winter average and expanding the width of the second tier.
Commissioner Denson and then Commissioner Edwards.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I guess, yeah, building on top of all of that, something I would like us to look into, if staff can, would be any communities that potentially made a move like this of changing their average and any the effects that happened there, to see if there was an increased usage, if they, just to see if anybody else has already done this too, to help gauge that and pull that information into it also, because I'd love to see all the information everybody else has asked for. But also just want to, point out for people, I mean, this is going to be a pretty big change with the customer service fee also cutting that in half. That's going to be, a $53 savings to every customer annually. So that's going to be helpful. And then a total annual savings to water customers of almost $2.2 million, and annual savings to sewer customers an additional 1.25. So I think, I have to commend staff for putting this together and bringing it, because obviously this is a time that our community needs a break, and I think this is going to be providing some of those breaks.
Thanks, Commissioner Edwards.
Yes, I was also hoping to get a finer point put on staff's estimation of the ramifications of this proposal on water conservation efforts. Thanks.
Thanks, Commissioner. I think staff can provide that kind of along with the other information. Commissioner Link?
Yeah, it was my understanding that the winter average, the annual average over the winter average was chosen because we have a substantial part of our population that is gone in the summer, so their water use actually plummets, our student population, our university-related population. But for your average homeowner who might have a lot of water, their water usage won't go up. So I think it's like a disparity in the populations over. I do agree with Andy. And I don't know that comparing to other communities would be helpful here unless you're comparing to another college town that has a similar population that we do.
Well, and I will say that the tiered approach to this is not a very common approach, and staff let me know that Fulton County does this. It's a fairly recent phenomena, but we will give you some feedback on those things. I don't think we'll be looking across the Commissioner Link at lots of college towns and find this type of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think a handful of questions staff is ready to tackle. Is there anything else that you'd like them to do some work on prior to our voting meeting? All right. Take those into account. We're going to move on to item number 13. This is the second amendment to the Board of Elections FY20 budget for some staffing costs, some mailing costs, some additional drop boxes and associated infrastructure. Any input on this item? Commissioner Edwards and Commissioner Link.
I looked at this agenda item and I noticed that a lot of staff time has been devoted to working with the separation of the precincts that were previously consolidated. I just wanted to state on the record, these precincts should have never been consolidated. I don't know why that ever happened to begin with, and I'm a little frustrated that we're now having to go back with a supplemental appropriation to cover staff time to separate these precincts back. We consolidated crowded precincts that resulted in long lines and difficulties voting. It should have never been done to begin with, and now we're having to pay for it once again. Thanks.
Thanks, Commissioner. And Manager Williams, I don't know that this applies to every one of the combined precincts, but I do recall that over the last several cycles, at least in one or two cases, that there may have been a time when a facility was under construction or unavailable for use. Is that the case?
I believe so, though, Mayor. I'd have to go back and look at those individually.
Okay.
To be certain.
Commissioner Link?
So, I just want to be clear, those combined precincts are being uncombined, and that's adding to staff expense to staff those. You know, this is an extremely unusual election year. The primary and local has already been postponed, delayed, and we're moving more and more towards mail-in voting. So I just wonder, is this to cover the primary expenses, or are we looking at fall general election expenses, some of this carrying over to the fall?
I think, Commissioner, this is just for this fiscal year.
I would
fall
hope
would be in the next year's budget.
I would hope that we would get ahead of the ball before fall, before deadlines. You know, for some of the location, you know, I know that the elections office has to report to the Secretary of State's office by particular deadlines where certain locations are and things like that. You know, I hope we would support the Board of Elections far in advance of that fall election to make sure that everything is in line. That's going to be a huge election. It's a general presidential election. We've got 2 Senate races. It's really important that we address these issues far in advance of the actual election. I mean, people are voting right now as we speak. Well, not as we speak, but today and yesterday, early voting started. And, you know, I've got my absentee ballot in the next room ready to fill out. You know, and I think I think we need to ask from the state for some direction ahead of time about mail-in voting for the fall. You know, I do not believe people are going to be confident moving in large groups out to the polls and pushing buttons on a screen. I know that I actually voted in the primary before everything was postponed, and I was extremely uncomfortable going into that voting booth and touching a screen, knowing that, you know, there was a pandemic heading our way. And I don't think people are going to feel very comfortable with that process anytime in the next year, you know, at least not till there's a vaccine out there. And I think we need to be prepared for that and accommodate in any means possible, accommodate mail-in voting and educate people. I think we need to, you know, give our elections office some money specifically for marketing and PR, billboards, and even mailed postcards informing people thoroughly of what the voting process is in this new age.
Thanks, Commissioner. And I give kind of credit to staff for having come up with some opportunities, and to the Board of Elections for carrying this through kind of exactly in line with your thoughts. Certainly this provides for public knowledge some funding for postage for those individuals who don't have opportunity to have postage themselves. And while this contemplates in the agenda item 2 of the ballot drop boxes, I've asked staff to find additional locations. And so I could only see those expanding. It's very much my hope that it just becomes easy as pie to vote in a non-touch kind of environment as we move into the autumn, especially, I think, for exactly the reasons you noted. It's going to be a high volume election. Just even over the last 4 years, we've seen more than 10,000 additional registered voters in Clarke County. And so numerically, we're going to have additional need. So I guess I'll Commissioner Denson's hand.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, and I guess one thing on one of the questions, I do want to point out that, yeah, Oglethorpe and Whitehead, which were unmerged, it was because Oglethorpe was under construction, but that construction happened a number of years ago. We've had elections in between, and definitely the unmerging should have happened before now. But on top of that, I guess so the purchase of the 2 ballot drop boxes, what's the timeline for us to be able to do that? I mean, that the main point of that is for people doing, you know, their mail-in ballots to be able to drop them off. But if we were to not be able to implement that until we vote on it, that gives us just a week. Are we able to go ahead and fast track this and vote this as a special session next week? so that we can go ahead and have these ballot drop boxes installed as quickly as possible so that they're the most effective?
Commissioner Denson, staff's already ordered the two that are in the agenda item and then two additional ones after further conversation, both with the mayor and the elections board. And so those are, in process. And just so the folks that are online watching can't see it, it's not a great deal of money for the ballot drop boxes. There's a security camera that's required to watch, and that's about $3,000. So that's certainly within my limits. Understanding your sharing your concern, I should say, about timing, staff had already advanced that.
Okay, I do appreciate that, and I'm not sure if it's on here, but from my understanding is that the locations for the two additional are going to be at the multimodal center and at the library. Is that correct?
Give me 1 second here. One of them that we talked about was the cooperative extension office fire station. So I know the mayor and others that we talked to had a concern about getting it outside the loop. And so we have the two initial boxes referred to here inside the loop, and then the extra ones are on the west side, the new fire station cooperative extension office on the east side at Barnett Shoals, fire station at Barnett Shoals.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And and then just to add to Commissioner Link's comments, I really hope that we can have staff going ahead and taking steps now to I want us to ensure that actually everybody is getting a mail-in ballot. Whatever steps we need to do, whatever kind of working we need to do with the state to make sure we can ensure that. I think that we need to have every registered voter in Athens-Clarke County receive a mail-in ballot, not have to go through a request form situation. But I would like us to be able to find the funding for that and find the way for us legally to provide that, working with the state to make sure it can happen.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Wright?
Thank you. I'm hearing some bits and pieces, and maybe I didn't see it in the agenda item. How is it that you guys already know where the drop boxes are going to be? And can you confirm that?
Yes. Well, the initial locations were done in concert with the Board of Elections. The mayor, having reviewed the agenda item, had some additional thoughts and spoke with, I think, Chair Evans on that, and there were some additional conversations there with the board, and the board agreed to expand the number of locations, and so working with staff, we have helped to move that process forward.
Okay, good. So the fact that it's on our voting meeting, as Tim was outlining, this is moving forward. We're going to have those drop boxes. How soon? And I guess we'll just tell people to look at the Board of Election site to learn those details.
Yes,
Okay.
we can get that to you, and I think within a week we should expect those to be installed. And again, just for the viewing public, the ballot boxes are I think a great convenience for folks. They're not a large piece of the cost here, and something that we can certainly go ahead and move forward with. But you're right, Commissioner. Right, we're moving this. We have, with the consent of the Board of Elections, put things into motion.
Right. Well, and I just wanted to clarify that the State Board of Elections, when they allowed those drop boxes, that was sort of their pandemic flexibility that they put in there, the same as you don't have to use a Board of Elections office. You can use a larger place to give the space. I think that's great. I hope that we can show the State Board of Elections that this is a easy way for it to happen, and that we can continue that way even after this year. The other part of that was that it's good that this can be approved without it coming back to us, so that we know that that's moving forward as well. I think that's great. And then I also saw in the news today that the Board of Elections counties staff can begin to process and feed into the machine like the early voters are doing the ballots. They can start that now at the beginning of that first week in June, so that it's not just stockpiled to start at 7 o'clock on election night. So that's another bit of flexibility. I'm not sure if that's going to help with the overtime that they're predicting, but I think that that's, again, the state board of elections is trying to help us at this level, and I'm hoping that our board of elections is supporting that process as well. If they have a special meeting or anything like that, I hope that that's working well to move this ahead. Thanks.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Neesmith?
Manager Williams, would you go over the locations of the drop boxes again? I got a little confused there.
Yes. There are, we've got one, of course, at the elections board office. That's already been installed. The 4 additionals are, as Commissioner Denson said, one at Transit, multimodal, one at the library, and those are inside the loop and outside the loop. West side at the Cooperative Extension Office, and on the east side, the fire station at Barnett Shoals.
Okay, and then another question you probably can't answer. I know the discussion about drop boxes happened some weeks ago at the Board of Elections. But now we're hearing of it. Now we're being asked for funds. Any idea what took them so long to ask?
Well, and again, this is just a small piece of many other things. And I want to go back to Commissioner Link's first comment, which I think is on point. This has been an unusual election year. We've been given new equipment, which we were in need of. There's been some debate as to whether that was the right equipment, but either way, we had to, make some additional power accommodations for it. We had to have some additional ancillary equipment, and y'all know that because back in February you approved the first increase for this, and then we did. The Board of Elections did choose paper ballots. That wasn't a planned expenditure. And then, of course, COVID hit, and nobody could see that. So there's just been a number of things that have really come at elections this year that have caused us to come back and ask for some more funds.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions about this item? Commissioner Herod?
To do this.
Sorry, I just unmuted you.
Okay. I think we both hit the unmute button at the same time.
All right.
So,
go right ahead.
Yeah. It's really just a comment, and I'm not sure whether this is possible given, the number of polling locations we have and staff and all the rest of it. But to the extent possible that we could have people living in commission districts voting in precincts that have the same number assigned to their district, I think that might avoid some confusion that some people might have on exactly where they're supposed to go and vote. And I was trying to bring the maps up, but I think some, for example, some voters in District 2 are in Precinct 4A. And I think there are some other examples of that. And it just would seem to make sense to me, to the extent possible, that, if you're in District X, you vote in a precinct that has that same number. If you're in District, if you're in District 15, I know we don't have, but if you were in District 15, you get to vote in a precinct that has the number 15 in it. Just that might avoid some confusion on the part of some people. That's all.
And to Commissioner Herron's concern, I share a desire for that kind of clarity, and some of that goes back to the deconstruction of the super districts prior to that change in the 2011-2012 period. Every individual resident's precinct aligned with that resident's commission district. So 3A and 3B were all in Commission District 3, and then of course you had the 2 super districts that overlaid. I have to imagine, I'm projecting, or speculating maybe a little bit, but it would probably be tough now to go to 10 sets of precincts, potentially possible, but definitely challenging given the commission maps that we have in front of us now. So Manager Williams, I don't know if you want to offer anything else. And I think you might have had another comment that I cut off when we moved over to Commissioner Harrod as well.
Well, two things, and address the matter at hand, and I'll come back to the comment I was going to make. It is that time where the census is on us, and every 10 years there is redistricting and reapportionment. So certainly making those changes will be easier at that time once the census is complete and we start that whole process. I was just going to say earlier, I need to qualify. We hope that the ballot boxes in all the locations I named will be installed within the week. The ballot box at the fire station at Barnett Shoals, which is having to be custom made, and that will be 2 weeks.
Thanks, Brian. I've got Commissioner Link, and then I think I see Commissioner Wright's hand also.
Speaking to the precinct numbers, those precincts, those voting locations, the number of voters assigned to those locations varies greatly depending on how many voters those locations can accommodate. The state has specific formulas for that. So it would be extremely difficult to line them up with the number of precincts of the district. I could see that, and things change. We come up with new voting locations. So I don't know that it would be efficient to aim for that goal. It might be, what might be helpful is if, what might be helpful is if people could just vote in any old precinct. This is all computerized technology, and whoever the voter is, the computer knows what district you live in. And from what I understand, the state kind of forbids that. But these are the kind of things that we need to advocate for. We have the technology to make these things happen, and also things have changed tremendously because of those voting machines that the state mandated as well. There are privacy concerns, and fewer of those voting machines can fit and maintain that privacy in some of these voting locations. So that's why I think that these formulas are going to be reconsidered, especially if mail-in ballot voting becomes a norm and fewer people actually turn out to the polls. So this is the dawn of a whole new era, and I think we're going to see how the direction things are going over the next couple of elections.
Thanks, Commissioner. All right, there's a lot of kind of questioning and perspective, but I didn't hear any substantive changes requested. So is it okay if we move this to consent?
I would like to move, but my hand has been up and down. But I'm just going to jump on in. How about that?
Go right ahead.
We keep talking about. We've talked about the drop box. We've talked about stamps, I think, and I think we talked about something else. I know a week ago we were still over 70 or 80 poll workers short. County Manager Williams, has that been addressed? Do we need to look at pay? But we were 80 something people short about a week ago, poll workers. And keeping in mind, most of our poll workers are elderly people. So those are not the ones that may be traditionally at the polls because they've been working for years and years, but this is not the environment that we may see some of our regular workers. So has that been addressed, County Manager Williams?
Yes, that obviously this has been on our radar, and we want to conduct as flawless an election as we can. And when COVID happened, that was a natural concern. Staff's been working on that consistently. At this point, we're down to less than 40 needed, and continuing to make progress. We're well situated for advanced voting. We're talking with the school district some of their teachers may want to help us. I know that we're going to use some of our own employees to fill gaps if we have to. We will be staffed come election day, one way or another.
I'm going to say this every opportunity I get, because I have some real concerns that sooner or later somebody's going to address to me. But this could, again, be a day of work, and not what they already get paid in addition to our community leaders. You got 16 community leaders that could put a dent in that number. And I am not going to be missing opportunities to address when we can work together and collaborate, especially when we're paying both entities. So every time I get a chance, I'm going to bring up those community leaders, because that's 16 able-bodied folks that could work a day at the polls.
Thanks, Commissioner. So everybody's fine moving this to consent?
Yes.
All right, Gene, we're going to go ahead and move number 13 to consent. All right, moving on to 14. This is the audit of the Athens-Clarke County Water Business Office. Commissioner Link, I'll let you start the conversation as Audit Committee Chair.
Yeah, I just want to ask the person to read this document and take a good look at the findings. There are quite a few findings, a lot of which the Water Business Office has been in pursuit of for a while. You know, there's been software that's been in the process of getting implemented, you know, and the whole remote meeting is addressing some of the recommendations. So I first of all, I'd like to ask anybody who's not on the audit committee has any questions about the report. If everybody's had a chance to read it or at least take a look at the findings, and possibly Senator Maddox could respond to those.
Russell, would you mute, please? Would you please mute, sir? Thank you.
Sorry, guys.
It's all right.
Let's see. I see a couple hands up in the window. Commissioner Harris.
Yes, I just had one question. Hang on. Am I? No, sorry, I had one question. So I'm reading in the report that one of the, I think it's on page 233 of the PDF, where it's talking about moving to allowing people to use credit cards, which they presently can do, but there's a service fee. And if I'm reading the report correctly, the suggestion is to simply absorb that. I think it's a 3% credit card fee. Absorb that and then charge it to recoup that payment by basically dividing that up amongst all water customers. Am I reading that correctly? It says specifically, the smallest obstacle is transferring the utilities cost of accepting remote credit card payments from those that elect that particular payment method to all customers regardless of payment type. But what that seems to me to be saying is those who want the convenience of paying by a credit card will end up being subsidized by those who have simply set up a bank draft where there's no fee. And I don't think that's fair.
Well, I may be able to shed some light on this. So the Water and Sewer Fund is an enterprise fund, so it does not get any tax dollars. The revenues come from the ratepayers themselves. So any expenses that are experienced by the enterprise is paid by the ratepayers. Now, I will say that it may come out in the wash, Commissioner Harrod. There are some efficiencies that are realized from that more automated form of payment. But you are correct. The source of the funds are the ratepayers.
Well, sometimes I have bills, doctor's bill or something that I pay with a credit card because it's more convenient for me. But I pick up the tab for doing that. I don't ask somebody else to pick up that tab on my behalf, and that seems to be what we're suggesting here. And if it's more efficient and we can serve more customers online without the cost going up, for everybody, that's fine. But it's an issue of equity. I mean, you're basically demanding more service by being able to pay your water bill by credit card online. Okay, that's fine. Then pay for it. Don't expect other people who want less of a service to subsidize you in that payment.
Well, I guess I would say that those are all excellent points. Looking around at some of the peer utilities, they've also abandoned the convenience fee, and it does. You could argue that it improves cash flow and that people can pay with their credit card if they're trying to manage their finances, and it's less likely to result in a cutoff as well. And right now, Commissioner Harrod, our stormwater utility, I don't believe that they don't charge a processing fee for the credit card. So in principle, this is going on with our stormwater utility.
I stand to be corrected, but I think the stormwater utility, you can pay with a bank draft and there's no fee, but I was under the impression that with a credit card, you still had a fee, but maybe that's been changed. Because I know when I looked into it, that was part of the things. I didn't want to pay the $3 fee or whatever it was to pay with a credit card, so I just had a bank draft drawn to pay my water bill and stormwater fee.
I can verify that, sir.
Process-wise, another option that we have is, as you look at the department response and you see the breadth of recommendations in the audit, I'd be glad to assign findings to government operations for consideration of implementation as well. Commissioner Neesmith, I saw your hand earlier.
That's right, Mr. Mayor. It's been covered.
Okay, great. Any other questions? Mr. Denson?
Yeah, I just had a couple questions, or a question for staff, I guess. So I noticed back on item 12 on the rate structures that part of the plan had an outline that we would be implementing at least part of the recommendations, the implementing an updated billing system. So I hope that the manager can speak to that a little bit. And then, but there's also recommendations for a few other technology and software updates with the ERP software, a few other things. I wonder if there's any update on those other things, or if right now we're just moving ahead with the updated billing system.
Well, yes, we are. And I feel like, the staff and the Office of Operational Analysis, have worked together, and these findings were communicated some time ago, and staff has been moving that forward. And so the draft RFP for the water billing office software update is underway. And so we're not waiting for that. We're moving that forward. And there are some other things that are pushing that as well. But in many of these findings where there were some longer, 12, 24 month, 18-month lead times, staff's already getting those moving.
Okay. Fantastic. Well, I want to commend the auditor's office on getting this together, and then also staff for being so quick to start jumping on some of those recommendations.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Link?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate to the rest of the commission to please take a good look at the document, read it thoroughly, forward your concerns to the manager's office and the auditor. I just want to make sure that everybody has a thorough understanding of the document before we vote on it in June. And I also want to point out just the need for some parallel language. The purpose, under purpose, it says to request approval of the audit. And under options, it says to accept. They should probably both say accept. So that's just a minor just grammatical edit. Just want to point that out. Is there anything else? Anyone? Any other remarks from anybody else on the audit committee? I'd suggest we leave this off consent in case, after thoroughly reading the document, anyone else has anything else to bring up.
Sure. Glad to leave it on discussion.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it. All right. Moving on. We have a couple items tonight that really involve getting our ducks in a row for application for low-income housing tax credits, which is a federal program colloquially called 9% tax credit application. And we have application due in June for redevelopment of the North Downtown area that includes Bethel homes. And so this item number 15 on our agenda is just an amendment to the Athens Downtown Master Plan. We need a master plan that was accepted within the last 5 years to apply for those low-income housing tax credits. And so this is just a slight update to that plan. And you can see at the very bottom of that plan, there's an amendment that's Appendix A. And so I'd point the public and commissioners to that, just the very last page of this, which is sort of the most pertinent component. So any questions about this? Commissioner Wright?
Thank you. I just feel like, and I guess it's because I'm a visual communicator, I just feel like we might need just like a piece of some writing on top of some of the topics that actually have something on them. So like one example, it refers to Armstrong and Dobbs property, when actually it could have a thing on top of it that says the mark and what date it was put there. You see what I mean? As far as things that are actually on there from when this was the hypothetical plan. I think Prince Avenue, 100 Prince Avenue also, there's something there now that would be accurate. I'm not saying about putting the actual design on there, but just enough so that people know the Classic Center memorandum of understanding, those parcels. I just feel like, without holding it up, because I don't want to hold it up, I know it's time sensitive for us to move the acceptance of it, right? Not approval, just acceptance. I just think that maybe it's an addendum that could be with it as well to make sure we capture what has happened.
I think it'd probably be possible just to kind of work with planning staff to identify those parcels that have seen some development or approved construction within the time frame of the commission's initial acceptance of this. You're right, Commissioner, this is time sensitive, so this does need approval at the voting meeting coming up. And so, Blaine, maybe if we could just work with staff to identify those parcels that have seen some development in the interim between initial acceptance of this, I think back in 2013 or thereabouts, and today, that would be helpful.
Right, and not a whole lot, just enough to have it identified without having to be visually accurate with it. I think is going to help the public as it picks it up that wasn't around here for the earlier stuff to know what we're talking about. So I appreciate the time on that, but I don't want to hold it up at all.
Thanks, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, first I want to point out, and maybe this is just me, but this document is not coming up from the website. Does anyone else having any trouble viewing this agenda item from the website portal? I don't know why it's not showing up.
I've not downloaded it from the public website. I downloaded it from our internal portal.
I'm
part of the full
familiar
PDF.
with the document, but I'm not.
I downloaded it. I downloaded it from the website with no problems. Did that today.
I'll try it again. But I do share Commissioner Wright's concerns. Like, this master plan was, it was accepted 7 years ago now, but it was never, it never had any teeth. And I do believe that there's a portion of the public that believes that, that was a document that was enforceable. And some of the ongoing development downtown is kind of counter to what is laid out in that document, the vision laid out there. So I think it is really important that we acknowledge and amend it at some point in the very near future. You know, and there is a Downtown Master Plan Committee which hasn't met in, I don't know, 5 years or something now. So I do hope that we can get that committee up and running very soon, because there is more large-scale development coming downtown. We have an item on our agenda tonight. And I think it's really important that we be transparent about what the meaning of that document is. It was very highly publicized at the time, and there was a lot of public input on it. And I think we owe it to the public to let them know that we take it seriously and that their input wasn't in vain, and that, you know, it was always presented as being, you know, an amendable document, but there's been no official movement to amend it along the way. So I would ask that we do resume that committee and start talking about the future of downtown seriously. And once we do actually approve the document, it kind of does have some teeth. You know, it is needed for these kind of, you know, future development and state funding, you know, and tax credit projects. So we need to take it seriously very soon.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Harrod, is your hand up for this item? Let's see. Looking through. Commissioner Denson. All right. Go ahead and move on to the next item then. This is the intergovernmental contract between the Unified Government of Athens-Clarke County, Georgia, and the Athens Housing Authority to provide for the North Athens Downtown Development property acquisition. This is here under title only, but just for the benefit of the public, this is related exactly to the same question, making sure that we've got everything prepared for application for those low-income housing tax credits that have to be applied for by, I believe it's June 20th. We've got item 17 is the update to the process for receiving and revising audit reports. Commissioner Link, this is back on the agenda after some additional work. I think you're muted, Melissa.
Sorry. When this first came forward, I think, you know, I don't think we gave it enough time for discussion in committee. It was our first committee meeting via Zoom or via an online method. And we had also seen the water business document, so we had a lot on our agenda. So I asked for it to be pulled off, and so we could discuss it again in committee. And I think we had a much more productive discussion where we were able to thoroughly understand what's being requested and the redundancy that was in this flow chart. And the manager participated in that discussion. So I feel like the new document makes it crystal clear that that final draft report from the audit office is distributed and is shared with the manager's office and the department head. You see, if you scroll down the agenda item, you see the yellow boxes. There is an additional yellow box off to the side. And in our discussion, you know, we talked about this would be a good time to have some kind of checkpoint with the committee to let the committee know that the audit is moving along towards its final stage, and giving, you know, members of the committee an opportunity to take a look at the draft and see what the manager and the department head is receiving. Not necessarily meet on it, but just a check-in to let committee members know that this process is moving forward. And if they do have any questions, you know, they can bring them to that next meeting. So we actually, in that discussion, we added another box to make sure there is an additional layer of transparency to the whole process, and that the committee is kept in the loop all the way. Does the auditor want to say anything else about this? Stephanie, do you want to add anything?
I think you did a great job. You covered it all.
Okay. Does the manager want to add anything?
No, ma'am. I appreciate the process and being able to discuss it, and thank you for that.
Okay. I'm happy to put this on consent if everybody's amenable to that.
Everybody good with moving this to consent?
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Gene, we're going to move number 17 to consent. All right, great. Appreciate it, everybody. All right, number 18 is an extension of the moratorium on acceptance of applications for demolition permits on certain parcels of land within the area described as the Downtown Athens National Register Historic District. We would have been in the process of opportunities for public input on this Western Downtown Perspective Historic District area, but obviously COVID has just made that challenging. I contemplated a variety of options and had some conversation with staff members about how that could be undertaken. And while theoretically possible, I think the challenge is certainly there to meaningfully have public conversations. So this would contemplate moving the moratorium through first Tuesday in November. Commissioner Link?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, for extending this moratorium. I think it's really important that we have those opportunities for public input, and it's really, you know, things have been quite chaotic the past couple months, and, you know, we are getting to a place where people are more comfortable with online input, but I hope we'll get to a place soon enough where we can have some of that in-person engagement that we had intended to have. It's kind of ironic. Commissioner Parker and I were having a phone conversation about this and having a panel, you know, to discuss the importance of downtown Hot Corner and West Downtown Historic District the very day that it was announced that South by Southwest was getting canceled. And that kind of smacked us in the head and made us realize that things were about to change and we probably weren't going to have those opportunities for a while. So I hope that very soon we will have those opportunities, and if it becomes apparent that we won't, we'll have to get creative about it. So thank you to Mr. Mayor for extending this.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Denson?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I guess I would just ask that we just start having staff right now kind of look into what those creative aspects could be, because we're moving to November 1st, knowing that it's very likely that that's flu season, and that at the oncoming of flu season, it's likely that we'll see a larger wave. So we might actually have more restrictive limitations in November than we would say August or September. So if that's the time period that we're kind of focusing on, I guess I find that time is less likely that we'll be able to have in-person communication than it would be if we say the moratorium go through, September. Something to think about.
No, I think that's reasonable, Commissioner. I wanted to provide sort of an outside window of time. I don't anticipate that we're going to have this actually last through November, but just to provide as wide a buffer as possible or as reasonable, but not overly wide, pushed it through November. But I'd certainly be very interested in the prospect of some public meetings in the June, July, August timeframe, and then coming to a resolution in August or September, prospectively. So I'd be glad to see that play out. Any other input on this item? All right, we're going to move over to receive staff reports on recommendations from the Athens-Clarke County Planning Commission. So we have two of those items. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the floor over to Brad Griffin, our planning director.
Okay, good evening. Can you hear me?
We can.
Awesome. Good evening, everybody. We've got two items for you this evening. First is a master plan development request at 230 Finley Street to go from commercial downtown West End to commercial downtown West End plan development. It's just a little under 2 acres in size. This is the Days Inn property, as you're all familiar with. Proposed mixed-use development consisting of 370 bedrooms and 224 structured parking spaces. Future land use map would remain downtown designation, and with all PDs upon approval, the report plans and architectural elevations become binding. I would encourage you, if you've not read their detailed report, and to do so. It's a pretty extensive report, but it sets forth a pretty nice outline of what they're proposing to do. They provided a lot of information, which I think is important because this becomes binding. I mean, they're down to structural designs, some architectural detailing. Those are things, if approved, that we have much more latitude during the development process to hold them and restrict them to, because it's been provided as part of their report, if this ultimately is approved. The project is seeking to allow residential development with some ground floor commercial, but some ground floor residential too, which is largely what is driving the PD. Generally, this type of a proposal, if they provided the required commercial ground floor, which is 50% of the overall, this would be a by right project that you would never see. And they've expressed that in their report too. There are some sections, especially along Reese Street, that they have real concerns with viable commercial making a go of it. And so they are willing to get into this type of a binding approval in order to provide some latitude to not have wholly commercial on the ground floor. See the unit breakdown there, 41 one beds, 82s, 41 fours, and then I think there are 5 or 6 small studios that are around 400 square feet within the total build out. Parking enters off of Reese Street and Finley Street. The main public entrance comes in off of Newton and is flanked on either side by a coffee shop and retail. And then waivers are requested for, as I indicated, some ground floor commercial reductions, unit size, street level structured parking, and some tree planting standards, which is a very technical waiver on its face. You see here the property, again, as I mentioned, it is the Days Inn property that's currently on the site. You see it there from an aerial view. I mean, it's kind of hard to see the overall build out from the proposed site plan because of the vertical nature of this, but that is how the proposal sits on the 3 cornered intersections of Finley, Reese, and Newton. And then you see here from an elevation standpoint, actually that top right elevation is going to be your east elevation. The second one down is going to be the western elevation, and then the south elevation. You see the amount of vertical grade change from Finley Street over to Newton along Reese as it drops down almost a full story at the bottom point before it rises back up along the eastern side. And then just a few views of what's there now, what's proposed. This would be along the Finley Street elevation. This looking at from the corner of Finley and Reese, what is there now, and then what would be proposed. You can see that front corner of the proposed development is kind of sunken into grade. That is a restaurant space. The Newton Street entrance with the retail and the coffee shop flanking the entrance, which is recessed for the residential component. Zoning does not change, just would carry a planned development designation if approved. And the Planning Commission recommendation is approval. There were some things still in final designs when we went to the Planning Commission. So they ultimately had 4 conditions. 3 of those conditions have been eliminated by revision. The only one that will come forward would be the right-of-way conveyance for the sidewalk. And I think that's largely along the Reese Street frontage. And with that, the Planning Commission recommendation was unanimous to approve.
Thanks, Brad. Melissa, this is in your district. Do you want to provide any context?
Yeah, well, this is zoned commercial downtown, which by right could allow for a 10-story building right up to the sidewalk. You know, the density downtown is, you know, very, very dense, which, you know, seldom allows for much leeway to do any negotiating. But because, you know, this is on the edge of what is the commercial downtown district, and it directly abuts, you know, historic neighborhood that still very much has single family neighborhood characteristics. The petitioner felt that it was inappropriate to have your standard commercial downtown ground floor uses. And I agree. I totally agree. You know, and I did meet with the architect and the developer a couple of times and spoke with the architect a couple more times. You know, I know that there's not a whole lot of, I know a lot of people are not too happy about some of this large scale development, but it is what is allowed by our zoning in that commercial downtown zone. So I feel like we, because they were asking to waive that ground floor retail requirement, we did have some room to talk about what is appropriate for this particular neighborhood, for this particular edge of downtown. And so they proposed the ground floor entrances on these apartments, which I think is a really good idea. I do believe that it'll help bring some life to the sidewalk in the neighborhood, and it will also make this apartment building more amenable to a diversity of tenants. There's a lot of 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. This is a very expensive piece of land, from what I understand. There's currently a hotel on it, and somebody could come in and build another hotel by right that's 10 stories tall. I do think that this will fill a niche in housing. People who want to live near the university, who might work at the university. And those ground floor entrances, I think, are a really good option for this kind of urban environment. You do see it in, other vibrant cities where you get, a block or so away from the commercial hub, and you have townhomes and apartment buildings that do open up onto the sidewalks. And I think that the architect has done a good job of setting the building back where it's appropriate and adding landscape and balconies and commercial patio spaces that kind of mimics what's already there, with Big City Bread right around the corner and the Bottle Works, just a block over. So I think this is, I honestly, some of the things that have been done here, I would like to see incorporated into our downtown code. There are upper floor setbacks. And I do believe that, that ground floor residential should be waived in certain areas of our commercial downtown district. I would rather see ground floor entrances than empty retail or vacant gyms or study areas on ground floor apartment buildings. So, I think the plan, this was presented to the Planning Commission for comment initially, and I think the architect took the Planning Commission's original comments to heart and tweaked it a bit. And, I think it's a pretty good project for what we typically get in our commercial downtown district.
Thanks, Commissioner. I'm going to move over to Commissioner Neesmith.
I watched this go through the Planning Commission, and it was an amazing change. Planning Commission made suggestions, and they did that setback on the upper floors. They made the streets more walkable. They made it look more pleasant, almost neighborhood-like in many ways, as much as a building like this can be. So, I'm with Melissa. Melissa did a great job too, working with them to bend it the way they did. And the Planning Commission said something like, "Well, this is unbelievable that you've actually fulfilled our vision of what we thought this should be like." I think those were the words that I heard. So yeah, this is a very supportable project in my mind.
Thanks, Commissioner. Commissioner Wright.
Thank you. I'm glad that they've solved some of the issues that had, and correct me, Brad, if I'm wrong, that staff wanted to table it, but it sounds like some of those issues were addressed, specifically that the firefighter access didn't work to all levels of the parking deck. Can you summarize that for me? I have a thing about parking decks and wanting them to be as safe as possible. How many levels do they have, and how many parking spots? And then how did they make it safer for that?
Okay, I think I can do that. I'm not sure I've learned how to use the pointer yet, but from a site plan, you can see the red line, the parking structure, 224 spaces, and I think it's on 4 or 5 levels. The fire department connection, if you're looking at the left side of the screen from Finley, you see the red water line. It runs into the center of the deck, and that's the fire riser and the fire department connection. And then there is also a stair tower internal to the deck that you could have moved from floor to floor. The fire department needed a remote exterior level access to get from floor to floor, and they were able to accommodate that really easily without modifying the design by placing it in the upper left-hand corner immediately off of Finley Street where that driveway goes into the deck. You see kind of the hashed out corner that's not a space. They just changed that to a stair tower that goes from level to level, satisfied the fire department, and did not require any exterior design changes. That was our biggest issue that we needed to have addressed before we could support it.
Okay. And then the final, it sounds like all but one element has been addressed, but planning was okay with it. Everything but something about the sidewalk.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, help me with that.
I mean, that was really not one that they can address at this point. It is an action that takes place during construction that we just wanted to make sure was understood in terms of the right-of-way dedication. So that's a typical condition that would not be expected to be addressed right now.
Okay, but this whole project will have, because it's a business, it will have have sidewalk all the way around it.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thanks. It does look like a great project, and yeah, I'm glad that they're still interested in moving forward with it at this time.
Thanks, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Any other input on this? Brad, this was the one-time site of Sky's place as well. Is that right?
Yes, it was.
Well, I have to walk by and genuflect for St. Sky. It's a relic of the 80s and 90s for those who were around during that era. So anyhow, I agree with everything that's been said about the quality of the project. I think it integrates nicely between the edge of the denser downtown and then the more low-slung single-family elements of the Reese Street neighborhood to its west. So, great work, everybody, and thanks a bunch for Commissioner Link interacting with the architect on this, and definitely to the planning staff and planning commission. So I guess moving on, Brad, to the last item on the agenda.
Okay, next item, and our last item for this evening is a straight rezone request and a future land use amendment at 105 and 155 Hickman Drive. This is the Bethel Midtown property request, and it is a Athens-Clarke County request. So we were the applicant and prepared the report on your behalf. It is a change from mixed density residential to downtown, and this would be the Daugherty Street design area for zoning, going from RM2 to commercial downtown Daugherty Street. Simply an extension of Daugherty Street for now, but we certainly anticipated and had those conversations with the Planning Commission. That is, the much larger North Downtown project continue to move through the community design process and the community input process. Our ultimate goal would be to establish a new North Downtown design area, specifically tailored to what would come out of this much larger process. That's getting a little ahead now. The order of business this evening is to rezone this property in question. As mentioned, from RM2 to commercial downtown Daugherty Street, currently 2 parcels at around 12 acres. It's existing multifamily development, and as I've mentioned, it also requires a change in future land use designation. See the property here. An aerial of the property. Existing mixed density residential on the left, that would change to downtown, which is a very logical extension of the existing downtown future development area, as well as a change from the RM2 designation to, again, what we feel and the Planning Commission feels was a very logical extension of commercial downtown as shown here. Having said that, your recommendations from the Planning Commission were to approve the future land use designation change to downtown and the CD zoning designation, and it was a unanimous vote.
Thanks, Brad. And I think you implied this is, essentially a placeholder designation while the more extensive community input process goes forward, and eventually I anticipate would result in a planned development, with underlying CD zoning. And so for members of the public, this is another one of those items that's being lined up to apply for those low-income housing tax credits for that North Downtown redevelopment, but in no way sidelines that community input process that is ongoing. And this is in Commissioner Thornton's district. Commissioner Thornton, did you want to make mention of anything here?
I think I spoke to you early, Kelly, about, and Mike has explained some things also. So it's my fault that I am not as not going or not knowing this was on the agenda with the planning committee. I'm not going to be able to jump on board with this right now. Again, it's my fault, not planning. It is definitely my fault, but I don't have enough. I'm gonna have to go look back at it, but you know, whatever you guys want to do is fine, but I'm not there.
Commissioner Link?
Yeah, you know, the rezoning of this property is basically what will allow that vision for the North Downtown District and the redevelopment of Bethel Homes to enable as much affordable housing as possible in that project. You know, by increasing that density, it will allow for the affordability of new housing and assure that every resident of Bethel will have a brand new home to move back into. So, I mean, I think that's the gist of this rezoning is, you know, right now it is a relatively low density. What is it, 25 bedrooms per acre currently?
24.
24. And by changing it to commercial downtown, it allows for 200. So it effectively 200 per acre. You know, we can effectively more than triple the number of bedrooms on that really, really desirable downtown property and assure that there is as much affordable housing as possible on that land. And, you know, from what I understand, this rezoning is what's necessary to get those tax credits approved, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And get the financing rolling. We understand the value of the project is determined by how much density is allowed on the property. So it's absolutely necessary that we go ahead and change the zoning so we can move forward by that tax credit deadline.
Thanks, Commissioner. Any further input on this item? Actually, I forgot that there was a item number 21, which is the airport capital improvement sub-project. So we're ready to move forward with that taxiway A construction service contract award. And I think Clerk Spratlin emailed that agenda item to you. Any input on that? All right. Want to move that one to consent?
Yes, sir. Yeah, let's move it to consent. But just to explain, this is a very important improvement, of course, which comes with a lot of matching funds to the airport. It'll help us park planes and move planes around, which has come to the point during, particularly right now, on big football days like Notre Dame and Texas A&M. We need more space. They're landing 737s at the airport on those days, and 150 landings on those days, anywhere between 100 and 150. So this is an important improvement for the airport. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. Andy?
Well, I apparently I have Commissioner Neesmith pronouncing Notre Dame the way I would pronounce it, Notre Dame. But, I don't have a problem with moving it to consent. The only thing I would say is that on the report on page 2, number 10, it gives a to be determined date on when bids were received. So I don't have any problem moving it to consent because I think it's a good project, but I don't know whether we can if there's that kind of missing data. That's all.
Manager Williams, can we fill in that blank?
Oh, no, absolutely. We'll send all of you an updated, corrected, with the gray shaded, so you can go straight to where those things were put in there. I think Commissioner Harrod's point was that if you didn't know that now, we'll have the bids by the voting meeting, but you may want to keep it off just because it's not a complete agenda item at this point.
I'm fine with adding it. As I say, I don't have a problem with it. I guess we can put it on consent, and if then the bids come back and we have a problem, we can pull it back off again. But I agree with Commissioner Neesmith that makes sense to put it on. Okay. And just to wait for additional information.
But we'll send the corrected version out with all the changes noted.
Mr. Herod, is there another way to say Notre Dame?
Notre Dame.
I spent some time there. That just sounds right to me. I never would have said that in Paris, Notre Dame. You kidding?
No, I'm right here. I always call it Notre Dame, the university, but then I'm upbraided and said it's not Notre Dame, it's Notre Dame. So, but that's not what the French would call it, or the English.
Well, when this is over, we'll have to visit South Bend and hear it straight out of the horse's mouth. All right, everybody. We do have a brief executive session for the purpose of real estate discussion. I'd like a motion to enter that executive session.
So move.
Second.
All right, got a motion from Commissioner Link, a second from Commissioner Denson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. If everybody wants to take 3 minutes and